All
All
right.
right, Alex, you wanted to talk about the
Yeah. So
QBR maturity assessment.
we just remembered to turn on recording. So if you're hearing this right now, we did our normal opening and harassing of our partners and typical rundown of everything going on with Lifecycle Insights. But today we want to talk about a little bit about QBR maturity. And so with that in mind, we're going to release an assessment that is going to go in the platform to let you guys kind of walk through and check some boxes and identify how mature your process is by comparison to what we're hearing from others in the space, what others are doing, what their best practices are, et cetera. So currently, and I don't claim to have the perfect handle on this yet. I'm hoping that you guys can give me some feedback to help me build this correctly the first time so we don't have to have version 17 of it. But what I'm hoping is that we can get a handle around the main categories that really fall into assessment delivery, and then talk about the assessment items and the things that we ought to be considering as we're working towards bringing the an assessment, as we're looking towards assessing the quality or the caliber of what you guys are working on. We really want to make sure that we cover all the things that are important to you. So under categories, I've got things like assessment specific categories, and I'm looking for my spreadsheet. Typical to me, I have too many tabs open, but I was going to run through some of the questions that I have and exactly where they sit. There it is. All right. So, we have a couple of categories. The grander assessment category really just covers some questions like, are we assessing status quo based on some sort of a framework? Are we doing that on a regular recurring cadence? Those kind of things. Under finance, we've got questions about, budget and how mature the budgeting process is. Under leadership team, we're just talking about who's attending this, right? Are you getting your client CFO, COO, CEO, CTO? Are all the right people seated at the table? Under experience, we're talking through some things like, are we using a fairly standardized template across our MSP so that if Alex is out sick, Kirk can go deliver my QBR, and the experience for the client will be at least carry some standardization with only a minor varying difference of sarcasm, right?
I was just going to say, I feel like if Kirk is picking up someone's, that would be interesting.
I feel like if anybody's picking up my QBR, he might be qualified.
I like
it. His sarcasm level's right up there. But really what we want to talk about is that experience, right? Does the client feel some sort of a standard? Is it the my MSP way, as we like to say? Is there a little bit of customization in there that takes into account how how an account changes over time, because they do, right? And at different points in their journey, we need to be able to customize it a little to say, hey, at this point, we're focusing on 365 security, but at another point, we're focusing on other cloud apps and other things. So we just want to talk about that.
I feel like you wanted to put some emphasis on MSP tools. I'm not sure why.
That is literally just Google saying, if you're going to use
the
really
59-point font was not your doing.
It was not my doing. It's not even optional to change it. So
gotcha. Okay.
That is bold just because Google really cares about MSP tools. We're talking about a little bit around experience, and some of that I'm playing back into client participation a little bit on. Then MSP tools. Are you doing cloud application inventories in addition to local physical assets and user inventories, things like that? Do we have some automation in place on change control and inventories and automation? Then the strategy component digs into client best practices and goals, strategic versus tactical focus, streamlining the tactical things down to just a scorecard or not utilizing them at all, sending an agenda ahead of time, some of those kind of things. So I'm interested, number one, if there's any huge gap that I missed in this, if there's something that is blatantly, obviously missing. Sarcasm.
The sarcasm
is a feature, not a bug.
In there. Don't think about where you are now, because some of you, I suspect, would already check so many of the boxes. But what I'd love for you to think about is when you started, how would you have known where you needed to go, right? Like if we're talking about the end result, what are some of the things at the beginning that would have defined, I need to move because I'm doing this, right? Like I'm doing asset lifecycle management, but I want to do full budget forecasting. So curious if there's anything that maybe is a lower level within these categories that Alex is talking about, or like Alex said, additional categories that maybe haven't been contemplated.
Just to make Tim happy, instead of framework, we'll call it a compliance framework, because that's the way it's worded in the bigger assessment. I like that. Greg is making me better again. He's got a tendency of pushing my buttons, but
I have a question about tags. In that last time you had actually kind of gone through the MSP shared responsibility matrix. And so we are now kind of building out the assessments for clients. And one of the cool things that we can do is give them access to those assessments and allow them to actually add or make some changes to those assessments based on things that are kind of pushed towards them. So what I'm doing is I'm tagging them based on also responsibility too. So is that responsibility in that assessment something that they need to work on, something that we need to work on, or is it, or is it a vendor that takes care of that? So now I can actually kind of give them their own dashboard, and they can take a look at those assessments, and they can then change out or add in information about a particular subcontrol in that assessment, and they can take care of their end. But one of the things I'm running into is that if we want to tag each one of those, it's global, and I don't see a way to tag it on kind of an individual basis. Is there another way around that, or something else we can do with that?
Not today. Today you're using tags in a way that I don't think they were really intended for. Although I think it's a great use. One thing to be aware of is that private comments are no longer private if you give your customer access to the assessments section. So just keep that in mind.
That feels like it could be a problem.
Yeah. So I don't feel like the assessments module today is really designed for a customer to see. However, if you have the right relationship and you have the right expectations, I'm not saying you can't do it. I think that in a future release, we need to address assigning a user as a tag, or tagging with a user as opposed to using a generic tag, if we're going to go down that route, or else give you some sort of a customer fillable.
My witty internal notes don't always translate well to users. So
so they have started.
Your sarcasm is a service. Yes.
Oh no,
it's
it's
not
just
a properly defined service. Yeah.
The first
Thank you for
step
letting us
on
know.
that is, how you're tagging a client as an external user. So they are absolutely trying to get to the point where they can hide private comments to external users.
It's
The
a
other
consideration, but we're not there. That's the
Yeah.
point we need to make clear.
And the other one is, does that change if you can give them access to a single assessment instead of the full assessment component, right? So you could do an externally facing one, because I know that too is like part 2 of what they're thinking toward.
Right. And we've been asked more than once for a link that we could
Yeah.
just mail a link and say,
I think I
log it
just
here,
got
and
a
all
ticket
you'll
for
see is
this
that one
week,
piece.
as a matter of fact.
So
Yeah, I guess the goal then is instead of having to always schedule out those QBRs and go through that with them, their interface or their dashboard allows them to see all the data, see, recommendations, see the budget forecast and everything else well before we even need to do so. And if we need to add something in midterm, we can add in a recommendation, follow up with that with the client, and now they can view that within their dashboard.
right. So the immediate next steps, the things that are coming down the road, like on the roadmap as it sits today, literally in progress. If you go in the platform and search roadmap, you'll see what we've committed to through the end of the year. One of those items is something we're calling Report Locker. And giving your client access to Report Locker will show them assessments that are completed, not ones that are in progress. So the beauty of that is you'll be able to take everything once it's done and give it to them. It doesn't solve the problem that you're talking about. And I think that's, again, a future step where we need to find a way to give you the ability to take a specific assessment and probably a subset of items on the assessment and assign them to a human and send those off. But I think, Marnie, we probably need to just communicate this back to the devs and really kind of explore whether it's whether we can tag it to a specific human, whether we tag it customer versus MSP or what the result there is.
Making some notes.
But I do, Jeff, think that, you know, that accountability conversation should be part of what we're talking about here. That's really where my head was at over here, was making sure the customer knows not only what they're accountable for in the takeaways, but in the broken items as well. You know, the things that we've marked red and yellow, if it's a bunch of policy junk, we can't do it without them.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, and then they can fill that out. You know, we set that as unknown or whatever the status is. And they're required, and they know that they're required to address that either with us, with their team, or in some other way. But, you know, that's part of the compliance. That's part of the compliance portion that we can't answer that question on their behalf, or nor should we, right? They need to take control of that, and they need to take, and they need to be able to fill that out. So if I give them right access, they can actually fill that out when they need to, and then we have those results available for whatever compliancy platform they have. So that's the way I was looking at it.
Yep. No, I think that's important. I'm on board. Just don't want you to get in trouble with it today.
All right.
Any thoughts
So
on it?
interesting. Sorry, Matt, thanks for the +1 on the vote. Like that is, I think that is, we hear co-managed a lot for sure. So that does make sense. Looking at Andy's, any thoughts to share on a roadmap request of being able to see financial recommendations across all clients so we can easily see how much is out there from a sales standpoint?
Yeah, so you can see two things today. And I'm not sure where we're missing it, Andy, but let's just dive in and look at that particular piece. And we're getting a little off track, but I want to make sure you guys get your questions answered. So Marnie, I'm going to steal your screen share and throw it over here.
Are you doing
Today,
customer success, or are you doing?
so today you have two choices. You can see roadmap recommendations here. This is going to show us, maybe not. Okay, yeah, there we go. So this is going to show me all of my recommendations. I probably don't want to look at all the years. So I'm going to go over here and just grab 22 and 23 and 24, maybe. Come on, you can do it. And not scheduled. So this view shows me all the recommendations that I've made across all my customers. It gives me some totals: $121,000 in 2022, $57,000 in 2023, 111 million in 20 and not scheduled. So we have one really kick-ass recommendation over here. But this gives me some visibility into the larger, just what are the big numbers and what's outstanding, capacity planning by quarter, et cetera. If you want to see a more detailed view of who has what outstanding, the customer success module does give you that. It's still a little more manual than we want to see it, but it's moving along. And what you see here is by product, how many clients need it, and by client, how many products they need and how much MRR is sitting out to pasture with each customer. And you could always go back and sort it by, all these, there's a couple of different ways to sort it. You can do it by percentage of alignment, et cetera. So we can see which clients are better aligned, those kind of things. So some of this data exists out there, Andy. It is in the second module, and there is an extra cost for it, but we are working towards bringing some of that content out there.
So. A lot of folks that we talked to last week like the fact that in this view, you can filter by account manager as well. So if you have a larger teams to get insights into opportunity per account manager, I think is important.
Yeah.
Alex is going to go have a conversation with Hogwarts straight away.
Apparently I have to go have a conversation with myself because I'm not doing any work over here. But yeah, I've definitely, you can see the clients that I have that don't have a lot of value left on the table, and I've got some that have significant value left on the table. So, and as an account manager, this should be the number that leadership is continually pointing at to me, going, "Hey, you should be generating $19,000 in new MRR. At least half of that should come off the table next quarter, et cetera." All right. So with that, if anybody's got, did I just pause screen sharing and not share my, I thought I was.
No, you're good. You're good. You're in customer success.
All right, there we go. Let's go back to this. So number one, what value do you guys see in being able to kind of assess your overall process versus what we think the more mature finalized outcome really is? And number two, is there anything else obvious? I saw Tim say data flow, and I'm going to think about where that really fits here. For highly compliant customers, there may be a conversation around that. I just don't know if the QBR is the right place for
I
it.
wonder if some of that is in standardization, right, of the process. Like, do you have that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Greg asked the question, and Greg, I put a note back into you about that. You were saying like the wrap up and your whole process is an important part of it, right? You leveled up your business review when you started asking those follow-up questions. Is that part of the experience, right? The more experience you have, or is it process that lands in strategy, or is business review process another category that you would want to see in here?
Oh, that's a great question. I think process is a category we need to add.
I knew if I said process that you would want to.
Well, the only reason I say that is that really the process itself speaks to the maturity, right?
Yeah.
And delegation is something else that we haven't really covered here, but it's not here as a conversation, but I think it should be.
Well, and
So
interesting, Tim said, would we be able to compare ourselves to others? That is our thinking, that we're uniquely positioned in the space to be able to collect that data, to let folks know, right? The most mature MSPs are tracking here. So it'd be interesting to have that data. I know, Matt, I was speaking about some of your requests around benchmarking data as well, to be able to see like, what are folks doing that do, the most. What are folks doing and where am I aligned to that?
Well, I mean, one of the things I'll bring up on that is, as you know, we came off of another platform similar to what you're trying to do, and we're here for a reason because of it. They implemented something very similar to that, where whatever, basically they took their customer base and then did, how do you compare to the rest of our database?
Yep.
And I found that to not be as helpful, because what they didn't do is they didn't categorize the size of the MSP or the maturity and size of the client. So yeah, you could say in network security, for example, they were at 80%, but doing an 80% and 8-person small MSP client is a whole lot different than a 300 or 500 seat. Yeah. And so you have to be careful what statistics you put out there.
I think there's some variation we can account for by saying in MSPs with, 50 or less clients, or, 20 to 25 to 50 clients or whatever. But yes, I think that standard deviation is always something that, number one, statistics lie, right? I think that's just the basics of this, is that
and what demographics would you want to know about an MSP to be comfortable that you were comparing apples to apples? And what would you want us to collect, right? The reality of it is we could collect it if it was valuable. Is, to Alex's point, number of active clients, is number of employees, is MRR, is number of users. What would be a good definition to say we don't want to collect data for no reason, right? If I always say, if you collect it, you better darn sight do something with it. So what would be the meaningful pieces that would get you what you want?
Which is probably questions that should be part of this assessment.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
You could actually use the assessment to do the filtering of people who use, yeah. So
there are two. I think the statistics get broken down into two parts.
Okay.
One is, what is the size of the MSP that you're talking about?
Okay.
I've worked in a 2-person MSP, and now I'm in a 50-person MSP. The maturity level obviously is going to be way better in a bigger company as a rule, but you need to have those same types of statistics, broken out for the MSP clients. So if you have, law offices, for example, that are 8 users, that's a whole lot different than a 300 user medical practice. So
is average size of what, to Matt's point, if we could ask an assessment in the platform, is the question average size or median size of clients with number of users, right? My average client is 0 to 10 users, 11 to 20. What would make sense if we're trying to get you to red, yellow, green it kind of for this?
Well, you're making me go back to high school math there.
Well, in a shocking turn of events, no one's surprised that I'm
Well,
making
and I
high
see things
school
like
math.
I see things too that would just be hard for us to really identify that, because we can look at 365 users or ConnectWise users, but if the data is not clean, if the data is not accurate, I was working with an MSP yesterday that had a client and they swear it's a 10-person client, and when they go log in, they're like, oh well, they have 47 emails because they have drivers who never touch anything but a cell phone. And, we don't really support them. It doesn't take anything to support them, but they're a 10-person client.
Right. Yeah.
So that,
to answer your question, Barney, I would lean towards median size rather than average.
Average, yeah.
Because it's average. Averages get very deceptive when you have a couple of very large clients.
That 100%, absolutely.
So that, I mean, that's as you know, we're still new in Alex. Alex, you have a meeting with me Monday morning first thing.
I'll be there with coffee.
Talking about some of the challenges we're having on getting our stuff, doing what we've been doing and moving it in. But I go right with you, Marnie, where you're saying I don't want to collect data that's not going to become information. If it's not data that doesn't become information, it's useless to store.
Yep.
I'm a firm believer of that. So we just want to make sure we're comparing ourselves apples to apples is really what I'm trying to do.
And the core goal of this wasn't even about comparison. It was about giving you guys at least a metric of saying, hey, out of the door, most MSPs are probably scoring really, really low on this, and we'll collect some of that data just as we onboard new folks. And then, hey, how do I compare to the brand new guy who's just getting in? How do I compare to where I was yesterday and where I want to be tomorrow or 2 years from now, right? I think my goal is as much just to give you a view of your own status quo so you can compete with yourself. While some metrics and comparison might be fun and neat, I certainly wouldn't want to bet the house on it or anything.
No, it kind of similar to the matrix you do with the asset collection, where how good is my end of life information, my warranty information, that type of quick matrix to make sure that you're comparing it. It doesn't have to be very detailed, but I looked at our imports and I looked at what we're getting from our sources versus what you guys are saying. Yeah, this isn't looking so good, even though there may be some greens. They're false greens because I know there's stuff missing, type of thing. So I've got to take it with a grain of salt, but at least I know what the source of my issues are, and I'm working on that outside of Lifecycle to feed clean. If I feed you garbage, I'm going to get garbage out. That's the reality of it.
Yep. I'm looking at Annie's comment. Will customer success eventually have a CRM in it, or is there integration to HubSpot or others coming? Advanced tools like that can help with scheduling, communication, workflow, task ownership, follow-up, etc. So we had a couple conversations around that last week. I think one of the first pieces, when we talk about segmentation in customer success, there's a big need to want to take a group of folks and all perform the same action on it. I think step one will be to create a CSV download that you could import into, right? Like you could tag them in your CRM. So you could grab everybody that was maybe segment A. So you could send out an email cadence to segment A. And then we've certainly, there was a new MSP CRM on the market that came to talk to us about integrations, et cetera. That might be interesting. So I think as that matures, there's definitely some possibility. We did not have the notion of becoming the CRM, but some of the functions to integrate may make sense.
You guys You guys have done a good job so far in trying to figure out where to integrate and where not to. So I have faith you'll figure it out.
I appreciate that. You can see in the, yeah, Matt, I'm writing down those demographics. Compliance focus, okay. Sorry, Alex, I think I'm done with it. I'm taking
That's
notes
okay.
of what's in the chat. If you want to go to the next.
I think we're at a good stopping point on this one, and that gives you enough time to kind of pick up and run with the next one. So I will stop my share.
Okay.
I'm going to grab all these notes and stick them in a notepad so that we don't lose them
Oh,
when we
so
get out
me
of here.
manually having them on a notepad is not a.
You're that's probably more likely to be found later on than my digital notepad, but I'll grab them as they sit.
Focus. Matt, just one clarifying question. When you say compliance focus and then you talk about customer industry focus, so maybe collecting like a vertical, because if you know their Department of Defense vertical, they're more likely to, there's a different level there versus, florists, et cetera.
Yeah, exactly. The small business, non-government,
Yeah.
there's a different level of maturity,
Non-medical.
right?
Yep. Okay, perfect. I've got all that, and it's starred, which are the two requirements to make it from my notebook to a to-do list, just so you know. If anyone ever finds my notebook lying around, please take all the start items and get them completed by Sunday. All right, I will share my screen next. So part of what Alex and I talk about, and Alex talked about for sure at the last several events that we've been to, have been about getting an end of year budget to folks, cleverly enough, by the end of the year. And it is the week before Thanksgiving. So we wanted to give some bite-sized pieces to make it happen, because we do feel like there's a maturity in building out the budget as well. I said, for someone who's never had a bite of an elephant, I talk about eating them all of the time. And we want to make sure that if you're not already delivering a fully mature budget, that we give you the bite-sized pieces to get there. So I will share my screen, and I will absolutely share. We have a couple of things, so I'm going to walk through these pieces and parts for anybody that needs a reminder or a first time run through of the button clicks. So for some of you, this is old hat, but for some of you, this might be exactly what you need to get to the next piece of this. So I'm going to share this notion of leveling up the budget, where we start with asset lifecycle management, right? And making it through these steps would get you to the point where by the end of the year, could everybody at least get a list of their assets in hopes that they might have some end of year spend down money. Where next up is contracts, right? Adding your own contracts, adding third-party contracts. And then the next piece is really the recommendation piece, which doesn't require an assessment, but for the most mature version of developing the recommendations would. But those are the three pieces that can build toward a budget. So I'm going to share this doc, but I'll walk through the components. So we've got it turned on so anybody here can access it. So that is in the chat. I will enjoy watching all of the aardvarks and other anonymous things that Google puts in my docs show up in the doc momentarily. There y'all are. It slays me to no end that we've got, anonymous crow and kangaroo and coyote, etc. So if you're aiming across all clients, right, what can I do to get them something before the end of the year? And William, this is story one that I tell of William. If you're still on the call, right, this is how you started with Lifecycle. So I'm going to repeat his story and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe William signed up on a Thursday. And I know this because Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we got emails. So this was 3 years ago. We got emails spot checking his comments on like, am I doing asset type policies correct, et cetera. And then he had 2 business reviews the following week. It was this time of year because it was right after IT Nation. And he delivered 2 business reviews where he basically just said the framework was red is bad, get the red out, go green, and delivered asset lifecycle management reporting and sold a $40,000 asset refresh project and a $60,000 asset refresh project. So I said it's not a bad deal for 7 days into a 30-day free trial of Lifecycle Insights if you can get it, right? So Williams paid for Lifecycle for all eternity at this point, we think. But that's kind of step one, is asset refresh. Now, all of the faces that are turned on, I know we're past this, but I'm still going to plow through this for others that this may be their first time really diving into how to do this. The initial integration, of course, so on the checklist, we would have you set up your initial integration with your PSA, and then other integrations. So H&I, we've put the documentation right in the platform. So if you're thinking like, I do have Meraki and I haven't set it up, then go click on the Meraki link. It'll walk you through the pieces, right? I do have SmartNet. Let's get it in there. And then this first video at the top walks through the data cleanup that I'm going to talk about right now. So it involves making sure, first out of the gate, we look at our data quality score. And again, this score is based off of whether or not we can find make, model, serial numbers. And there are some places that it talks about in the video deciding what's important of any information that might be missing. So when I click into the asset list, if I'm new to Lifecycle, one of the very first things I want to do, Alex, I always start with the end of life. Do you like starting at end of life or operating system when you're trying to start refining your data?
I always go to end of life.
Okay,
That's always my first go-to.
Yep. So clicking off the red, yellow, green of end of life. Of course, we've cleaned up our demo site more than once since Alex and I do it all day, every day, cleaning up data in front of people. The first thing you want to do for your clients is to spot check the end of life. If you are new and you are on your first client, I recommend taking one of your most complex, your largest client, et cetera, and doing this and establishing a pattern across your data. You may see things like things listed as servers that are really virtual servers that you want to update, workstations that you want as laptops, et cetera. And our data cleanup docs walk you through those pieces. One important piece is once you've done it for one, you don't want to do it one at a time across everybody else. So I think this is the next step of maturity, is to then go to asset ad hoc and run things like end of life. So grab the filter and say end of life is missing. And when I save this, you will get the number of records across all of your clients. So again, any place we can't automate, we at least need to do in bulk, right? I know William wants us to click all of the buttons for him, but if we can't click them for you, we at least want you to be able to do them in one fell swoop, right? So here, if I generate this report, I can see all of the assets across all of my clients. So you look down my company names, it's all of my clients. For many of you that I'm looking at right now, we were not able to bulk update when you first bought Lifecycle Insights. So if this is new to you, you can update in bulk from the asset ad hoc. So I know, William, you know that because you were one of the ones that wanted the bulk update. But if I then go into end of life, I use my searches, et cetera, to find what I'm aiming for. You can bulk update these to generate those replacement costs. So this is key. Again, there's a whole 30-minute video in that doc that'll walk you through all of the cleanup pieces. But the goal would be to not have anything missing an end of life date that you would want on an asset report, because that won't land in your client's inbox as something they need to refresh immediately. So the goal is to clean this up and say anything folks need to replace sooner rather than later is red here with a date and a replacement cost on there. Alex, anything else in the initial, like, all right, our first level of maturity, getting something out the door to clients at the end of the year for asset list?
No, I mean, the real focus here is just end of life and deduplication. If you get to a point where, you really want to dig in with a client, you can spend time on more of those things. Sanity check warranties on critical assets, but most MSPs these days aren't just a warranty factory. So you may have a way that you want to identify core switches, firewalls, servers, something like that, and just sanity check that they have warranty expiration dates on them, and you can track those. But the real important thing is just having critical enough data to get the first budget out, and you can always refine after that.
Well, and to Alex's point, if you are saying, so here I'm top bar asset type, I require that my servers and workstations have warranties, right? You can limit the report to just that and clean this up. So if you're really trying, again, with 5 weeks, 6 weeks left to the end of the year, you're trying to get something out the door. These are ways to make sure it's focused on the critical pieces that you need. After that, next step up in budgeting would be the contract component. So again, this is level 2, adding contracts. Again, the links are to the documentation so that you can set up all the pieces and parts that you need. So in here, if you are a managed shop or an auto task shop, we can pull over manage agreements, additions, auto task, your contracts. You can show additions if you want the subcomponents of it. Once you set that up once, we will pull it over nightly. Don't forget, you can always refresh your data and sync on demand top right if you would like. And the other piece here that's even more important is the additional third-party contracts that you're adding. So the value of third-party contracts, Alex and I use the same use cases over and over again, so I suspect it won't be the first time you hear this. Printer, copier, phone service, ISP providers, line of business application, etc. Why? So I can tell someone talked to Alex last week at the booth, because when I got on the demo today, Alex, he said, tell me the story again about how I can level out the expenses across a budget, when I've seen the ups and downs in your spreadsheet view of the budget, and I might want to convert something to hardware as a service or cloud services, etc. I knew he'd talk to you for sure. And the other piece is getting insights into when folks are having conversations around renewals. And of course, if they're paying a huge line of business expense in a particular month, to be able to add that contract right into Lifecycle so that you don't go talk about 2 servers coming due the same month their $30,000 line of business application is due, would be helpful to the budget. We do have a list.
If you want to know what contracts to add, I just threw that list in here, but I'm sure you've already got it covered here.
Yeah, that list is in here. Yeah. The contract use cases is linked right in here, or sample items you show as a contract. I suspect they're the same thing, but that's fine. You can link to
The
it.
one we should add there is cyber liability insurance. I don't think that, it is, you have it there.
Yeah,
Perfect.
we've got cyber insurance policy.
Perfect. I think that one didn't make our actual list.
Okay, we can update them for sure. So that is next step in leveling up your budget to the next level. And then finally are the recommendations. Now, the longer term, of course, is to create your assessment that associate the items to recommendations. But if you are trying to get something out now and have not developed an assessment, you can always build a recommendation right from scratch. So I can go in and add a new a new recommendation. If you've created templates already, you can fill one in, or you can just start one from scratch. So recommendation from scratch, and you can new things they need today. And it can be labor costs, material costs, an end of year refresh, anything, right? Remember, if you save the recommendation, you can then also add recurring costs. So if you're thinking you want them to recognize the fact that they need to add a recurring cost, or everything's going up $5 a user, whatever, you could add a recurring charge here that will land again on that budget forecast. So we're aiming to drive all of those pieces into the budget forecast. If you regularly watch my Monday videos or came last 2 weeks ago, you saw that we have the budget board released. So now you can show the budget the same way you can show the recommendation roadmap. This board does not let you drag and drop. This is just a view. Again, we talked about this 2 weeks ago. You don't want to be in a budget, drag assets into a new quarter and update their end of life date because you want to hold that to be true. So you need to either go into the recommendation board or the assets themselves if you wanted to move it around on this board, but it does give you the view. And then typical with the reporting options, you can, if you just want to look at contracts and subscriptions, you can, and we still have the other 2 views, both the spreadsheet view and the detail view. So that's a fairly quick run through, but the document has a lot of links to videos and longer documentation around how to do all of these pieces. But with end of year coming, folks are really trying to get something out the door for everybody. And if you've only got 5 folks in the platform and you're deciding, I still want to get something out to everyone before the end of year, we wanted to make sure we gave you some levels on how to do that. So Alex or anyone else, any pieces or parts that you want to add to that conversation?
I would just add that as we continue to refine our process, time is a factor. These meetings are, pushing an hour and a half now, right? And we're even starting to, I've even had some requests, hey, can we add this? Can we do know before reviews, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, we can do all those things, but now we're getting into 2-hour meetings, right? And we've got a pretty good refined agenda, budget, risk maturity model, recommendations. We kind of go through those things. About the time we get to the end, we're still pulling a little bit of bright gauge data. We're still doing some of that operational IT review, right? And then we're getting to the end and we're doing what I heard somebody else say, which is meeting wrap, schedule the next one. But boy, we're pushing that hour and a half, and so there's that balance. And
So go ahead, Alex.
Well, all I was going to say is, sometimes when these meetings get long, schedule a break, right? Folks are going to need it. But what it tells me, if you're doing this and your clients are saying, we want more, what that says to me is you're delivering value, which is so different from where so many MSPs started on this journey, right? We started this journey with, please never come back and do one of those again. I would like to have that hour of my life back. So it's a way different conversation. And I think that's a huge sign of success. And it's a great problem to have, that you have to juggle. How much of it do you cover and when?
And the other piece of that is, don't forget, like, it's all continual improvement. So take a good hard red line look at what you're doing and say, could some of this have been an email, right? As you slowly move some of those pieces to the below the line, the appendix, right? We have also provided this information. Is any of that something you want me to talk about? At the beginning, the first time you have the conversation about your users, I'm sure people are all over it because they're like, where did all of this come from, right? But the third time you have the conversation about the users, are you still having it? Or do you just send it to a project manager and say, can you check in on these 2 for me? So I think being willing to take a look at your own process and say, it might be a combo platter from what folks have said on this call, the maturity level of the client, as well as the maturity level of your process, that you might be able to push some of those things off. But to Alex's point, if they want to talk about it and want you back to talk about it, that's a sticky client.
This is that. How do we know that we're winning? This is how you answer that question. Like, that is a great problem to have.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I will say that, I don't know, Andrew Juranek is on the call here from CIT also. What are we, 6 or 8 months into this? And, so we're having a lot of what we call now the first modern QR.
Yeah.
That's been the term we're using, and we still have some legacy ones that are left over, and we're trying to make that shift. And it's through the refinement and determining what customers see value in, and maybe what they don't want to see, and yes, what can be an email and those kinds of things. So I appreciate all that insight. That's really helpful.
That is part of Greg's wrap-up process. When he's the one that put in the chat that he's got a wrap-up process, he asks what they don't want to see again, for sure. He's got 4 specific questions. We've got the webinar or the weekly workshop where he talked through that to make sure that they are getting value out of everything.
Yeah, that's great.
Check the chat.
Yep.
Oh, so honestly, I just looked at this STOCC and I thought, well, there's an acronym in this space that I didn't know. And now I realized it was just mistyping Scott. I was like, crap, I have another one. Is that related to a sock? Nope, that is a typo. Perfect. Yeah. Excellent. Any other comments, complaints, questions, or criticisms?
I've been called a lot of things. Stock is not one of them.
Well, I bet it could be worse, though. I've been called Stockman on the regular, for the record, so unlike yourself. Next week, those of us in the US will be celebrating Thanksgiving, and so you're happy to celebrate with me, but we were thinking of canceling this call if everyone is good with that. All right. So you will get that note in the Monday email. And then as always, if you have questions for us along the way, reach out anytime. We'd be happy to chat. If you're not, we haven't plugged this in a while, so I'll plug it now. If you're not in either our MSP Geek Slack channel or in our Facebook group, we do, that is a way to get us quickly as well. So if you are either of those, if you participate in either of those communities, jump right in. You can find us there, and lots of other folks participate and give good best practices in those.
We have old habits that die hard, but MSP Geek is largely moved to Discord.
Oh,
these
it
days.
is Discord. Yeah. Sorry, I hang out in Slack only because I feel like I'm going to bump into my son in Discord in a gaming situation. I'll get over it and I'll land in Discord. I'll start turning that one on instead. All right. Oh, I see more chats. Well, I gotta like those MSP geeks that send you to LCI. I actually had someone say that to me today, that they were an MSP geek and found us. So that's excellent.
They're having their own conference and we will be there as a sponsor. So
For sure.
that relationship is strong.
GeekCon, what is it, May 21st to 23rd or something like that?
It ends on my birthday. So we're going out drinking for my birthday afterwards.
Oh, and a shocking turn of events. There will be a
Shocking turn of
party
events.
at a GeekCon. All right. Well, I hope everybody has a great week. As always, we are super thankful for you, but I'll say that the week before Thanksgiving, and have a good one.
Yep. Everybody enjoy your holiday.
Thanks. You guys too.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Take care.